This is Ozzie's tale and has been written by Jenny Cox. Ozzie was a wise old barn owl. He lived in a hollow tree in the heart of a thick wood. All the animals and birds loved Ozzie. Ozzie knew everything. He knew the answers to all their questions. He could solve their problems, and he always had time to listen to their chatter or to laugh at their jokes. But wait, we must start at the beginning of Ozzie's tale. Ozzie was born in the corner of an old barn. He and his brother and sister would sit on a beam and watch their mother and father fly in and out of the barn. How the baby owls wished they could fly. They would sit and flap their tiny wings and wriggle their legs and tails. They were ugly little creatures with no feathers and big round eyes. They were always hungry and ate the worms their mother brought them greedily. As time passed, the young owls grew rapidly, and before long they grew some fine fluffy feathers. One day Ozzie's mother said, "Today I think you are big and strong enough to learn to fly." The little owls were so excited. Their mother led them to the edge of the beam. She showed them how to spread their wings and sail gracefully into the air. Ozzie flapped his wings and jumped into the air. He landed in a pile of straw. The other little owls laughed, and he felt very silly. "Never mind, Ozzie," said his mother kindly, and she picked him up in her beak and placed him back on the beam. "Try again," she said. "Don't be afraid." Ozzie tried once again. Again he landed in the pile of straw. He and his brothers and sisters tried and tried to fly. Suddenly Ozzie's brother flew into the air with a loud squawk, and soon his sister was fluttering round the barn too. Ozzie sat shivering on the beam. "I will try once more," he thought. "I must fly. Whoever's heard of an owl who could not fly?" he muttered to himself. He spread his wings and flapped them hard and flew up, up, up into the roof of the barn. He was flying. "Look, I can fly! I can fly!" he called to his mother. It was so easy when you knew how. The owls would sleep all day. When it grew dark in the evening, they would go out exploring and hunting for food. Ozzie's mother and father taught the little owls how to catch mice, worms, and insects, which they brought back to the barn to eat. One evening, Ozzie woke early. It was just getting dark as he flew across the countryside. He loved to see the light shining from the cottage windows in the village. He landed on a window ledge and gazed into the brightly lit room, at the people inside. It looked much cosier than the old barn, which was very cold in the winter when the north wind blew in through the cracks in the roof. "I would love a home like that," he thought. "One day I will build myself a house and make some furniture." Of course, he did not know how. Ozzie began to sleep at night and to leave the barn at dawn. He loved to watch the people in the village, especially the children. He would fly straight to the school and sit on a window ledge and gaze into the classroom. He watched the children looking at their books and wondered what they were doing. He listened to every word the teacher said, trying hard to understand. One day, Ozzie made a very exciting discovery. As he watched the very smallest children, the teacher held up a picture of a cat. Then he wrote the letters C-A-T on the blackboard and pointed once more to the picture of the cat. Next, the teacher held up a picture of a dog. He wrote the word dog. Ozzie thought hard. What did it mean? Once more, the teacher held up the picture of a cat and wrote cat. Suddenly, Ozzie realized that those strange squiggles on the blackboard must be a code, and that what the teacher had written meant cat. He waited excitedly for the teacher to write dog once more, and to hold up the picture of the dog. When the teacher did just that, Ozzie nearly fell off the window ledge with excitement. He let out a loud squawk, and all the children looked towards the window in astonishment. At last Ozzie understood. From then on, Ozzie learnt new words every day. Sometimes, when the children had gone home, he would slip through an open window into the classroom to read the books. He would read until it was too dark to see the print. He'd read books on history, geography, maths, French, and science. He would also watch the woodwork class making tables and stools, the pottery class making plates and pots. He also learnt to knit and to sew. He even learnt to cook. He loved school. As Ozzie grew older, he decided it was time for him to find a home of his own. "Goodbye," he said to his mother and father, feeling rather sad, as he flew away from the barn. When he reached the village, he flew straight to the school and sat for a few minutes, taking a last look into the classroom at the children and the teacher. Then he flew off across the fields. He flew miles and miles across rivers, hills, and roads until he reached a dense wood. As he flew over the trees, he came to a small clearing, where a ring of giant toadstools stood. He could see a group of animals sitting talking. A large hare sat in the centre of the group. Ozzie flew down, flapping his wings. "Woo woo!" he hooted. "Woo woo!" Some of the smaller animals scuttled away to hide. The larger animals looked very cross and stared at him. "How rude you are," said the hare. "You have interrupted our meeting." "I'm so sorry," said Ozzie, "but I have flown miles, and I am looking for a new home." He told the hare that he felt very tired, and could not fly any further. Soon the hare smiled at Ozzie, and introduced himself. "I'm Hector," he said. "I know where you could live. There is a big hollow oak tree near here. Come, I will show you." He raced away amongst the trees, and Ozzie flew after him. Soon they came to an enormous oak tree, and Hector pointed up the trunk to a big hole. "You would be very warm and comfortable in there," said Hector. "Thank you," said Ozzie gratefully. He flew up into the branches of the oak tree and stared into the hole. The tree trunk was completely hollow. Ozzie pulled some twigs and branches across to form a floor. Then in he went, and soon fell asleep. Next morning, he started work on his new home. First he made tools. Then he made a proper floor and a rope ladder, which he tied outside his home. He made chairs, tables, and a bed. He even made some bookshelves, although he had no books. After several months of hard work, he had a beautiful home. The other animals would come and gaze at it. They would beg Ozzie to help them to build houses, and soon most of the animals had beautiful little homes, some high in the trees, others hidden amongst the fallen leaves or thick pine needles. Ozzie was very happy living in the wood amongst his friends, but he wished he had some books. He loved reading, and he missed the school, the children, and most of all, the books. One day, Ozzie woke to hear Hector shouting excitedly, "Ozzie! Ozzie, wake up!" "What is it, Hector?" he asked. "I have found some books for you," called the hare. "Come and see." Ozzie followed Hector through the woods. After a while, Hector stopped and pointed ahead. There was an enormous pile of old rubbish, empty bottles, tin cans, buckets, everything you could think of. "Look," said Hector, and pointed to some tea chests full of old books. "I saw some men put these here today," said Hector. "They are going to burn them. If you want them, we must collect them before the men come back." Hector ran off into the trees. Soon he returned with a badger, several hares, rabbits, squirrels, and some otters. They all picked up as many books as they could carry, and took them back to Ozzie's tree house. The animals did not see Ozzie for several days. He sat and read and read. He was so happy. He had books on the shelves, books on the table, on chairs, the bed, and even on the floor. Then, one morning, he flew out of his oak tree and back to the pile of rubbish. He carried some old sheets of metal into the wood. He spent all day collecting bits and pieces, and soon there was a great pile of odds and ends near the old oak tree. "What are you doing?" asked Hector. "What a mess you are making," he scolded. "Why have you moved all this rubbish into the wood?" asked Hunky, the red squirrel. "I'm going to build a spaceship," said Ozzie excitedly. "Oh, what?" asked Hector. Ozzie explained, and Hunky and Hector asked if they could help him. They spent many months working from Ozzie's drawings. They would work all day, and then, as it started to grow dark, they would light lanterns and work on and on into the night. Soon their spaceship was finished. They carefully checked everything, and Ozzie was ready to test it. The spaceship looked splendid, shining in the sun. "Can we have a go?" asked Hunky. "Please," begged Hector. So Ozzie agreed. They climbed inside and closed the hatch. All the other animals stood well back and watched in excitement, wondering what was going to happen. Ozzie pressed a button. There was a loud roar. Flames of yellow and red shot out from under the spaceship as it rose slowly from the ground. Up, up it went, high into the sky above the wood, and soon the animals on the ground lost sight of it as it disappeared behind the clouds. Hunky, Hector and Ozzie gazed out of the windows. The earth looked smaller and smaller as they roared away into space. They passed the moon and could see craters all over its surface. "It looks very dusty and grey," said Ozzie. "I don't want to land there." On and on they travelled. It was black outside the windows, but every so often they would see a bright star twinkling in the distance, or a red shooting star would flash past. Suddenly they heard a loud crack, followed by a bright flash and a crunch. "What was that?" gasped Hunky fearfully. Hector looked very frightened. Ozzie looked worried. He wished he had not agreed to bring the others with him. He should have tested the spaceship on his own. It was too dangerous. Perhaps the spaceship was breaking up. "Where are we going?" asked Hector anxiously. "What shall we do?" whispered Hunky. In the distance they noticed a faint green glow. The green light became brighter as they grew nearer. "It is a green planet," said Ozzie. They landed gently on the surface. The ground was covered with soft green moss, which seemed to glow. "The rocks and stones are green," explained Hector. "The flowers are green," whispered Hunky. "Everything seems to be green," said Ozzie. "I wonder whether anybody lives here," whispered Hunky. "Perhaps there are green monsters here," said Hector, and Hunky shuddered. "Let's take a look," suggested Ozzie, feeling scared. "What a beautiful place," said Hunky, starting to feel a bit braver. They all jumped down onto the green moss and looked about them. "Can you see anybody?" whispered Hector. They all had the feeling that they were being watched, and as they rounded some green rocks, a large green butterfly fluttered down, stared at them, and flew away without a word. A green stream trickled past them, and a frog jumped out of the water, croaked at them, and dived back into the water. Suddenly they all jumped. "Hello," said a loud voice. "Who are you?" A strange bird stood behind them. "Whatever is it?" whispered Hunky, wondering whether the bird would attack and eat them. "It's a dodo," explained Ozzie. He had seen pictures of dodos in his books, but he'd never seen a live dodo before. He hoped the dodo was friendly. "Hello," said the dodo again. "Where did you come from?" He seemed quite friendly, so Ozzie showed him their spaceship, and told him how they had travelled from Earth. The dodo looked surprised, and very interested. "This is the planet of Mentor," he said. "My grandfather told me that my ancestor travelled from Earth many, many years ago." He continued, "My grandfather has told me all about Earth, how parts of it are white, parts brown, and parts green like Mentor. Everything is green on Mentor except the dodos." "Which part of the planet Earth do you come from?" he asked. Ozzie explained that they live in the green part of the Earth. He told the dodo how the flowers on Earth were all the colours of the rainbow, not just green. "It must be very beautiful," sighed the dodo. "My name is Dan," he said. "I will take you to our village. Follow me." They followed Dan up a winding green path, through thick bushes and between rocks and stones. Suddenly they saw hundreds of dodo birds, some standing in groups talking, some sitting in huge grass nests. The dodos stared at Ozzie, Hector, and Hunky in amazement. They crowded round Dan to take a closer look at the strange creatures. "Who are they?" asked one dodo. "Do they bite?" "Of course not," said Dan. "They are earth creatures," he explained, and told the dodos all about Ozzie, Hector, and Hunky's journey to Mentor. One old dodo looked very excited. "This is my grandfather," said Dan. "He knows all about Earth." "We must have a party," exclaimed the old dodo. "We must celebrate this wonderful day." That night, what a party they had! All the Dodos joined in. They ate exotic fruits, nuts and berries, and drank some sweet green wine. Then the Dodos sang and danced. After a while, Ozzie, Hunky and Hector began to feel very tired. They had had such an exciting day. Dan led them to a large grass nest, and they all climbed in, and soon they were fast asleep. Next morning, Dan and the old Dodo woke them gently. "Good morning," they said. "Did you sleep well?" "We would like you to meet the Mentons," said Dan. The old Dodo explained that only friendly visitors to Mentor were taken to meet the Mentons. "Who are the Mentons?" asked Hector. "The Mentons are the inhabitants of Mentor." "They are very shy and do not like meeting strangers," said Dan. "They live inside the planet," explained the old Dodo. "They do not like bright light." "The Mentons are kind and intelligent," continued Dan. "They brought the Dodos here from Earth." "Come with us," said Dan. "This way." Dan and the old Dodo led the way out of the Dodo village. Soon they came to a cave in the side of a cliff. In they went. It seemed very dark in the cave, but soon their eyes became accustomed to the darkness, and they could see small green lights around the edges of the cave. The Dodos led them into a narrow tunnel, which seemed to be never-ending. Then, as they rounded a bend, they could see a brighter light in the distance, and quite suddenly they found themselves in a huge cavern. Round the edges of the walls were giant green eggs, neatly stacked in rows, as though on shelves. Each egg had a round hole in its side. It was silent in the cavern. Dan whispered to Ozzie, Hector and Hunky to keep perfectly still. "Don't move, and don't make any noise, or you will frighten the Mentons," he said. Then he led the way round the cavern. They walked slowly past the eggs in a big circle, back to where they had started. Then they all stood still once more. After a moment, a small green face peeped out of one of the bottom of the eggs. Then a tiny creature emerged from the egg. It was like a tiny human, but it had shiny green skin and long silver hair. It had a happy smiling face with a small round nose. It hummed gently, and then dozens of small green faces appeared from the eggs. The Mentons climbed down to the floor and stood gently humming to each other, watching the strangers. Dan and the old Dodo introduced the Mentons to Hector, Hunky and Ozzie, and exclaimed how the earth creature had travelled to Menton. "Their spaceship is badly damaged," said the old Dodo. "They will not be able to travel home in it." "We thought you may be able to help them," said Dan. The Mentons hummed gently to each other. "Come with us," said one in a soft sing-song voice. The Mentons took Ozzie and the two animals to see their own spaceships. Ozzie was thrilled. They led them into another large cavern. Ozzie, Hunky and Hector could see the sky outside through a great hole in the roof. On the floor of the cavern stood some objects that looked like giant silvery green mushrooms. One Menton walked up to the spacecraft and hummed gently. A door slid open. Then some steps slid down from the doorway to the ground. The Menton climbed the steps and beckoned to the earth creatures to follow. When they were inside, they seemed to be surrounded by coloured lights. The Menton touched one light, which flashed, and a large screen appeared in the centre of the spaceship. "Watch carefully," said the Menton. As they watched the screen, they saw a picture of the Earth. "We will take an even closer look," said the Menton. "We may be able to find your wood." Ozzie told the Menton exactly where the wood was, and the picture on the screen changed. They could see a ring of red toadstools. Ozzie could see his home in the hollow tree. They all felt very homesick. The Menton looked at them kindly. "I know how you feel," he said. "I will take you home," he said. "I can transport you back to Earth in a few seconds." Ozzie was delighted. He had been so worried about his own spaceship. He knew it was badly damaged. He thought they would never be able to return to the Earth in it. "I will take you now if you are ready," said the Menton. Ozzie, Hunky and Hector called "Goodbye" to Dan and his grandfather and waved to all the friendly Mentons. The Menton in the spaceship hummed gently and the door slid shut. Then the Menton hummed 3 times and the spaceship door slid open. Outside the spaceship they could see a ring of red and yellow toadstools, clumps of yellow buttercups and white daisies. "We are back on Earth!" cried Hunky. Hunky, Hector, and Ozzie climbed down the steps and waved to the little Menton. "Goodbye!" they shouted. "Thank you so much for your help." The little Menton smiled, hummed once more, and the door slid shut and the spaceship vanished. A crowd of small animals rushed to greet Hunky, Hector, and Ozzie, asking where they had been. But would they ever believe Ozzie's tale?